Okay, hey you guys, thanks for tuning in to the Diva Hustle Show. I have Janice Hisle, right? The 20 news reporter for 20 years, an author, a journalist. Did I miss anything?
Fitness instructor.
Instructor, business instructor, exactly. So how are you today, Janice?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's nice day out today. It's going to be one of the few that we have here in Ohio. Where are you?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
Oh, next door.
Yeah. We had some bad storms yesterday. Well, overnight, it was kind of scary, thunderstorms.
Oh,
Yeah.
we didn't have any of that going on, so it's beautiful
Lucky,
today.
lucky you. So let's get into tell me about some of the experience you had as a journalist for 20 years. How was that?
Oh, how long do you have? Well, I got to tell you, I got into the field just because ever since I was a little kid, I loved reading, writing, and talking to people.
Okay.
And I thought, if I do this journalism thing, I can go out and meet new people, learn new things, tell other people about it, and get paid for it. Not a bad deal, right?
Right.
But, well, on the other hand, I didn't account for the deadline pressure and the real difficult situations that I would encounter, such as, I covered probably somewhere around 300 homicides by the time I left daily newspapers. And unless you are a very, very heartless individual, that is going to take a big toll on you,
Right.
And some people, they just get hardened to that. But I think it was like the double-edged sword. One of my strengths, but one of my weaknesses is that I did feel all of that. I was able to put my emotions over here to the side, but yet relate to the family, and then I'd get home and cry.
Right.
Right. So it was interesting because I had like a love-hate relationship with the homicides, because I was always fascinated by, how does someone become a victim?
Right.
How does somebody become a killer?
Mhm.
How does possibly someone become wrongfully accused? Because I'd seen that as well.
Right.
And what are all the dynamics around all of that? And then the ripple effects on the family and the friends of both sides, the perpetrator and the victim.
Right.
And then how does the justice system work? And I learned about all of that over the years. And there were some things I saw that really troubled me. I do think that the majority of people in the justice system are trying to do the right thing, but I also think when it goes wrong, it goes upside down, and there's not a lot to change with the way it's set up right now.
Right. And so do you find that doing your job as a journalist, like compared to now when you have like the fake news, did you see that kind of ethics going on as a journalist?
I've got to tell you, what I see as a consumer of news today, I'm a book author now, so my perspective is different. Okay. But when I was coming up in the journalism profession, the things that I was taught don't appear to be the things that the people are now taught, or like following the principles, because I was always taught that you should never let your opinion seep into what you are writing.
Right.
Say, for example, that we are talking about this pen.
Right.
And it is my job as the journalist to describe that it's a black pen, it's this long, and it has this wording on it or whatever. It retails for whatever the price is. Those are the facts. But then it's up to someone over here for me to quote this person and go, tell me, what do you think of this pen? And if they say, oh, it's terrible. This over here says, oh, it's great. But it's not up to me to make those judgments or to approach this person and go, this is the worst pen I've ever used. Don't you agree with that? Or, that is not the way it's supposed to be. So that's a really trivial example of a bigger principle. One of the things that I think is especially bad is in the world of politics.
Right.
There were times in my career when I had to go cover a political event for somebody who I absolutely disagreed with. But you know what? You could not tell that was how I felt.
Right.
Based on what I wrote.
Right.
Because if I did let that seep in, there were checks and balances. My editor would go, wait a minute, Janice, you can't say that.
Right.
I'm cutting this out, and here's why. You let your perceptions leak in here too much.
Right.
So I don't think that happens now. And I think part of the reason is that, unfortunately, the checks and balances aren't there. A lot of people do not realize that when the internet really exploded, a lot of newspapers didn't keep up with that. They didn't find out a way to charge for it right out of the gate. I remember at the newspaper where I worked, we started putting our news articles free on the internet. And there were people questioning that. Is that smart to do?
Right.
They're like, oh, there's not that many people that get it free. They'll still buy the newspaper.
Right.
But
right.
now, because people are trained that content is free,
Right.
well, you get the quality of what you pay for.
Sure.
Because a lot of the reputable organizations do have paywalls and do charge. And I would recommend that people do try to support those news organizations, because the staff is absolutely skeleton crew at many of the news organizations. By the time I left my last employer, there were only 4 reporters covering the territory that used to be covered by 18.
Wow.
That just gives you an example. So what kind of quality job can you do?
Right.
And what kind of checks and balances can you put in place where they would pull you back and say, wait a minute, you can't write this way. You have to be more fair to both sides.
Right.
They're just so busy covering the basics that there's not a lot of thinking, I don't think, that goes on. It like really critical thinking, like, is this fair?
Right.
They're just trying to be accurate, which doesn't always happen either.
Right. True.
So
True.
That's my biggest concern, is that it's kind of like, part of it is there's not the checks and balances, but part of it is that the training of the journalists has changed. People are now taught to be advocates.
Right.
I'm an advocacy person as opposed to being a reporter.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with that if it's labeled correctly, if it says this is an opinion, this is an analysis.
Okay.
But if it's masquerading under a headline of a news story and it's not news, it's actually more opinion,
Right.
I do have a problem with that. And I think a lot of consumers of the news, of which I am one now, would agree with me.
I feel so. How do you feel about the suppression of freedom of speech that they're trying to push on journalists in the field?
What do you mean by that?
So meaning, like, right now you have some, because again, we go back to the money, right? And so you have some news report outlets that they got to get the money. So you'll have some people that feel like, well, don't touch that story. You know what I mean? Or don't say this, or we're not going to report that. And sometimes if a journalist sits and reports certain things, then you haven't noticed they start getting attacked. And even like recently, you had like some journalists, it was a report, I don't know if you're in like the rap and things like that, but a journalist was reporting the facts about the COVID and the vaccine. And she was going back and forth with the rapper Nicki Minaj, and she started receiving death threats. And so it's almost like, journalists is no more, you're not, if you say what you feel or report the facts, let's report the facts, then it's like almost your opinion has to be suppressed. You know what I mean? As a journalist.
Well, I think there's always been a little bit of a threat that, you as a news reporter could be attacked,
right?
Either just like publicly or, or even personally. I had an editor who had a Molotov cocktail thrown in his house back in the day, like years ago, because he wrote a story that some people did not like. Wow. So you did always run that risk. But I think what's problem now is the social media has put all of that on steroids, basically.
Yeah.
Everything is stronger, faster, harder, and like it can go viral like that. How many times have you heard about like somebody supposedly being dead, like so celebrities supposedly being dead, but then it turns out they're not dead?
Right.
But it goes viral, and then so there's all these people, the first wave of people who hear that, if it's corrected later, they often don't get the correction. Right. If there is a correction. Right. Sometimes the correction never even happens because that news reporter is too busy and on to the next 5 things. So I don't really know what is the solution to this problem with journalism unless consumers are willing to pay for quality, unbiased reporting.
Right. Right.
So there's no such thing as being 100% unbiased, because we all have our upbringing. Right. Our life history is going to tint our glasses, so to speak, the way we view the world. But there needs to be, some kind of the checks and balances back in place, and the stopping of the advocacy journalism.
Yeah.
I really am against it, because I'm an advocate for getting as close to the truth as you can.
Right.
And I don't care what my opinion is. If this, using my pen, if this pen, there's no disputing that this is a black pen. Okay. That is a black and white fact right there. But I can have this person over here again, giving that opinion about it. And this other person, it is not my job to give my opinion and let it pollute the perception of, like I said, this trivial example, or whether it's something very big like the vaccine, or whether it's something political, or something with Afghanistan, or any of the other big issues that are facing our country.
Right, that's true. So let's jump into your book. What are some of the lessons you want people to learn from reading your true crime book?
Well, that is a wonderful question. I actually like to address that, because to me, my goal in telling this story was to allow people to imagine that they are in the story themselves. What would you do if you were this person? This story, by the way, is about a couple where they were only married 4 months, and the husband gets accused of drowning the wife in the bathtub. And a lot of people judge this man right out of the gate because how he sounded on the 911 call.
Wow.
To people who did not know this man, he didn't sound very upset. He's like, my wife fell asleep in the bathtub and I think she's dead. That was his first statement to 911. But people who knew this young man, they thought he sounded really upset for him.
Okay.
So I think one of the big lessons that can be learned from this book is the way we judge people without even realizing it, and how it makes a big difference if you know someone. Like, people who know me know I'm very energetic. And if they saw me on a day where I was kind of down, they would detect it. But someone who just met me that day, they might think I was up, because they don't have any base to compare it to, right? So what happened is that I don't take a position in the book as to whether this guy is guilty or innocent. I try to let the reader decide that based on I reinvestigated the case. I dug through literally like 30,000 pages of stuff. I have 9 boxes of material that I condensed into this relatively little book. So this will save you a lot of work. If you don't want 9 boxes of material, you can look at just this. And I did my very best to distill it down to the most powerful and important. And again, I know that's a judgment call, but the things that stand out, for example, the people who said about the 911 call, the people who knew him said, no, he sounded really upset. I took every bit of evidence and tried to interpret in the innocent way and in the guilty way, in the innocent way and in the guilty way, different people's mindsets about the same piece of evidence. Is actually a very fascinating case, because get this, again, how we assume things. Let me ask you, when you hear or see a news report about, say there's a murder, and then they make an arrest in the case, do you or people tend to say, oh, they got the guy who did it?
For me, no, but I hear a lot of people, they'll say, oh, they got the guy that did it. And believe it or not, 9 times out of 10, that's not the person that actually did it.
So you understand, I learned to be in news business. I was taught over and over, you cannot convict a person upon their arrest. You have to say, this person is accused of, this person is charged with. But so many times I hear people say, oh, that's the guy that did that, or that's the lady that did that. As soon as an arrest is made, we tend to convict. We have a guilty mindset right now. And I think it's because we want to believe that the police and the prosecutors and the official people are all competent and honest and doing the right thing. And a lot of times they are good people in those fields, don't get me wrong. But when those people make mistakes or have bad motives, it's kind of like your brain doesn't go there. Because I think at the end of the day, we all want to think, this would never happen to me or anybody I know, anybody in my family, anybody I care about. So I'm not going to go there, because that's a scary world to live in, to think it could happen to anybody, or you could be possibly wrongfully accused.
Mhm, mhm.
And so I think that jurors are already biased. I don't think there is any such thing in the most jurors' minds as innocent until proven guilty.
Oh, yeah, it's
I
guilty.
think
until
it's
proven
guilty till proven innocent. And
You're
I've
right.
heard that from jurors. And I
Yeah,
just sit there and I go, okay, you really said that. I took down their comment. But I'm thinking in the back of my mind, that's not how it's supposed to be.
right, right. It's
And
not.
that's very troubling to me. And I think that is one of the biggest problems of our system is there is not enough education of the jurors
Mhm.
and possibly policing of the jurors. And what by that I mean, in this case I wrote about, the jurors actually absolutely violated the rules. They went home and experimented on how long it takes a body to air dry. It
What?
was not part of the testimony. They laid down naked on the carpet and everything.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so this case went to trial 3 times because trial number 1 ended with the conviction, but it got thrown out because of the jury misconduct, them laying down naked on the carpet. Who does that?
Right.
And, then the second trial, it ended in a hung jury because you're required to have 12 people in the state of Ohio who reach a unanimous yes or no,
Yeah.
guilty or not guilty verdict.
Mhm.
Trial 3 did end in a conviction. But to this day, I'm given a lot of presentations where people debate this case here in the Cincinnati, Ohio area where they know of this case, or even like internationally or nationally. I've actually had people contact me from as far away as Australia. This case has been
Wow.
on Dateline and it keeps getting, rebroadcast on like the Oxygen channel.
Okay.
And so it's weird because on the one hand, I'm so sad about this case and like the human misery that is throughout. Like the guy who got convicted, his mother pretty much drank herself to death because
Oh,
she had
wow.
started her life as like a secretary and then worked her way up to a vice president's position as a single mother
Wow.
at her job. I mean, I respect that all day long, don't you?
Right. Yeah,
And
right. Working
so
hard. Yeah.
yeah, and she throws all that away to like, she put all her retirement savings, remortgaged her home, did all of this to defend this man. I mean, they spent like $500,000 and they're just like an average middle class family, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And people thought that they must have been people of means because they were able to afford these trials. Well, they were not really able to afford it because they relatives were mortgaging stuff, retirement savings, like I said, all gone. And she literally drank herself to death. She was
Oh,
found dead by this guy's twin brother a couple years after he got convicted for the last time. And it was just chilling because he goes, I think she's dead. Same exact words that his twin brother said about the wife. I think she's dead.
oh, wow. Check that out.
I mean, you can't make that up. I mean, I guess you could, but so it's weird. I'm fascinated by this case, but I'm so disturbed and saddened at the same time. And I
Right.
think you had asked me at one point about women, particularly being
Yeah.
fascinated by
Yeah.
true
That's
crime.
yeah.
And I think that I've read actually some articles. I've been curious about that because most of my readers are women.
Okay.
And I think it's partly because as women, we kind of hope that maybe we can arm ourselves with some information that will prevent us from becoming a victim. I
Okay.
think that's part of it.
Right.
I think the other part of it is, as a general rule, I think women care more about what makes someone tick, right? I don't
Okay.
think men don't sit there and ruminate about what makes this person this way. And I
Right.
think, like I said initially, even at the beginning of our talk here, I'm fascinated by what makes people tick, what causes someone to become a victim, what causes somebody to actually be a perpetrator, what causes someone to possibly be wrongfully accused.
Mhm.
And so I think that those are some of the factors why women are much more interested in true crime. Do you agree, or do you have a different thought about it?
I think because like you said, I think most women are more intrigued in the mental part of it to find out like, well, why did he do that? And what was it deciding factor? Like I know my cousin, she watched a lot of the little crime shows. And I'd be like, turn that stuff off. Cause to me, it's again, I feel like when you watch a lot of the crime shows, it start creating a bias in your head. So, but for her, it's like, oh yeah, he was just crazy. He was just obsessed, and that's what made him tick, and she cheated on him. You know what I mean? So I think it's more of the mental part why a woman wants to know, like, well, what made him do it, and things like that. And men, on the other hand, is just like, one thing is love, or you know what I mean? It's something, it's so simple with them, but for us, it's more complex, if that makes sense.
I think women pick up on nuances a lot more.
Yeah.
Like the details matter more to us.
Yeah, more to us than them. Yeah. So it's more, I think it's more of that. Like I said, when it comes to the true crime, like I said, my cousin, she'll watch him all day, and I just be like, I'll turn that stuff off. You know what I mean? Because then, you get that in your mind, and you're like, oh, at some point he's going to, tick and go crazy, or he's going to kill. And it's just like, not everybody's like that. Like you saying with the case, it was so many things. And even like, I remember a Peterson case in California, and instantly from the rip, he was guilty, right? Like before he was even arrested, charged, had a trial, everybody like, oh, he was guilty. The wife is missing. They was having problems. And when you see them interview the victim, or you see people that they interview on the news that may have known him or saw the couple, they, oh yeah, one day she was unhappy. She was crying with tears. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of, let's say hypothetically going on. And so you just be like, okay, all right. But he hasn't been charged yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of judgment based on outward appearances. And, and here's the thing, do we really know what one of the things the prosecution kept saying in the case that I covered is, do we know what goes on behind closed doors in a relationship or a marriage? No, we do not. Yeah. And, what you're able to find on paper, like any emails or text or whatever, may not reflect what was actually stated verbally that nobody recorded or whatever. Right. So you just don't know. But about this particular case, the one I covered, I go back to the evidence. What is the actual factual evidence? And in this case, I still have yet to anybody tell me how a grown man is able to drown a grown woman in a bathtub, yet walk away from it with no defensive wounds on her. Her fingernails were not broken. There were no scratches on her or on him, her elbows, knuckles, and knees, nothing. There was no sign of obvious injury on this woman's body or on him. Wow. Now, there were marks that showed up later on her body, and the defense position was that those were caused by the paramedics when they were trying to save her life, because they were manipulating her neck and tried 5 different times to intubate her, maybe 6. To try to put a tube down her throat to help her breathe. Wow. They're moving her neck like this to try to see where to put that tube. Wow. And so there's marks here, and also they put an IV in her neck. So these marks that showed up later, the bruising, was that caused by all of this medical intervention? Or was it caused by something this man did? But how would you, again, have those be the only real marks? There were a couple small bruises on the side of her head, like one right here, but this one looked like it was super old, and someone said she stepped on a rake and it went like that in her head. Okay. So how do you do that without having, don't you think you'd be scratching and clawing and biting, or if you're getting approached from the back, you'd be reaching for the hands and trying to pull them off of you. Right. It'd be a struggle. Right. And so there's just a lot of questions about this, especially because she had signs of a possible medical condition, and there were no tests done while she was alive or after her death about certain disorders that they think she could have had that have been associated with drowning. Wow. So you see the mystery here. Yeah, I see it. Yeah. I see it. So Janice, what made you decide to become an author? Oh, well, because the news business was kind of circling the drain, and it was really hard with the stress I was under. And I really couldn't get this case out of my mind. Long story short, my husband finally said to me, look, you are just possessed with this case. You will never forgive yourself if you do not try to get to the truth of this. He said, quit your job, write your book. You will never forgive yourself if you don't. That's good. And what has been very satisfying about that process is I tended to write long, and editors were always like, Janice, you write too long. What are you trying to do? Write a book? Like, apparently I was. Because I always like to dig into the nitty gritty of everything.
Right.
So that was very satisfying. But what's frustrating is in the news business, you would write something right now, and then it's in the paper or online, like right away.
Right away.
And so you have something to show for it, like right there. So that the fact that my book took me 18 months to research and write was, am I ever going to be done?
That's a lot. That's a lot. What challenges and fears did you face as your career changed and becoming an author? How did you overcome those fears?
Oh, I love this question because it was a real thing for me. Thank you for asking that.
Mm-hmm.
So that process I just mentioned, that it's not a lot of investment when you write a news article. A lot of times, well, sometimes I did some more investigative stuff that was longer, but not a year and a half. Okay. Yeah. So my fear was writing a book is a different process than writing a news article. Am I going to invest all this time,
right,
to get, the cover design, to get all of this stuff put together for this book, and then it's a complete flop and people don't like it, and I get criticized or get threats or get, like my house attacked or, whatever. I did have a lot of fear along those lines. Okay. And I have to credit my husband quite a bit for this, because he said to me, you know what? I don't care if you sell one book or 1 million books.
Right.
What matters is you, Janice, are going to tell this story like no one else can tell it, with the integrity it deserves.
Right.
And that is what this is about.
Wow.
And it set me straight. And right. I was trying to be guided by what is the right thing to do here. Okay. What wasn't it? The ultimate goal of a journalist is to try to bring out the truth and set these the best you can. I mean, finding the truth with a capital T is very elusive.
Yes.
Finding the truth, at least with a small t, you can do that. Right. What I mean by that is I actually learned that principle in journalism school, is that the capital T is, this is the gospel truth, right? But the small t is, yes, we do know that this is what was stated. Yes, we do know this is what the evidence is. But do we know if there was evidence that wasn't found? That'd be truth in capital T. We do not know for sure. Right. So we find as much of this truth with a small t as we can, and then put it in a format that people can reach their own conclusions and make sense out of the world we're in. Right.
Well, Janice, I'd like to thank you for coming on our show, because I think that people like you that write books about true crime and going out and putting in the hard work is kudos to you. Keep up the work. And your husband is amazing, because without him, you wouldn't have been writing this book. And so just keep up the good work. And where can our listeners find you and get in contact with you and purchase your book at?
Okay, so a great way to get in contact with me would either be my website, which has a contact me link. It's thesubmergedbook.com. Okay. Or you can find me on Facebook under Janice Hisle, Hisle, or you could look at, the title of my book is Submerged, Ryan Widmer, and then there's a little bit more. But if you search for Submerged Ryan Widmer, you'll find my book page. And on there, I have stuff not just about this book, but about the justice system and about journalism, which are my real passions in life here, other than my fitness stuff, which is really But yeah, people can find me there on Facebook, or I also have an Instagram, but I don't do a lot with that right now. Okay. So the best way to reach me would be either one of those two ways.
All right. Thank you, Janice. And yeah, are you writing any more books?
Oh, actually, yes, I am. Right now, this is something else I wanted to share, just to hopefully encourage someone who might be listening to this. So do not limit yourself by saying, I am only a true crime writer, or I am only a computer programmer, or whatever it is you do for a living. Because if an opportunity comes your way, it's probably for a reason to make you stretch. We do not grow unless we go through a little bit of pain doing that, right? And so here I am. I wrote this true crime book, and then somebody who read that recommended me to a family who wanted a biography done of a lady who died of breast cancer. So I wrote that book. I got hired to write that book.
Okay.
And now I got hired to write a third book. I'm currently writing a memoir for a lady who fought for justice for her 2 abused children for 20 years.
Wow.
And so it's about her struggles, it's her personal life story wrapped into some problems with our justice system once again.
Okay.
So by the time I'm done with that book, which will be sometime next year, I will have written 3 books in 3 different genres: true crime, biography, and memoir. And I never would have thought that it would have led this way, right?
Yeah.
So don't limit yourself. Opportunity comes your way. Really sit there and like take that as a challenge to yourself and make the most of it.
It is excellent. It is true. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to challenge yourself, because you just never know what is going to push you towards, you know what I mean? What doors are going to open. And there's nothing wrong with a challenge. You know what I mean? You can only learn and grow from it. And that's what, you know, we all have to realize as people. I mean, I'm sure, you know, like you said, you're writing 3 books, 4 books, and, you know, you be on the bestseller list and we'd be like, hey, I remember Janice coming on. So, you know, it's just, the sky's the limit. You just can't limit yourself.
Right. I mean, I'm glad you asked that question, because I do hope that maybe inspires somebody else to try something that they're afraid of.
Right, right. That's true. Well, thanks, Janice, for coming on the show and talking about your book. I love for you to come back when you finish your other book so we can dive into the whole abuse in the criminal justice system, because, you know, we do need a criminal justice reform. You know what I mean? All these years, you know, criminal justice system been around since what, the 1800s, and it's 2021 going on 22. So we need a reform. So it'd be interesting to talk to you about that.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it a lot. I really enjoyed our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.